to Crystal's welcome. This is our webinar to look at more insights into our new team assessment, BRITE. It's nice seeing many of you. I've worked with a lot of you before, talked with several of you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lonnie Van Dusen. And my colleague, Joseph Lehman, and I are really pleased to talk with you today about this new developed assessment that we believe has the most insightful and comprehensive views of team effectiveness. Now, we've got a lot to cover today, and it's a fairly dense webinar because we want to make sure that you leave having all the information that you want to know about BRITE. So we're going to ask two favors of you. One is, don't worry if you don't catch everything as we go through it. We will be giving a transcript back to you that has the entire session recorded. And we will also be providing a transcript of the questions that come up, as well as answers to all of them. To help us move forward with such a large group, we do ask that you don't stop us to ask questions as we go forward. If you have a question, just put it in chat. And then at the end of the session, we have left time to answer questions, and we'll try to cover as many of them as we can, and then also provide answers later when you get the transcript. Okay, I want to begin by turning it over to Joseph and asking him to share with us today a little overview of the purpose behind measuring team effectiveness.
Thanks, Lonnie. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. I just want to orient us to the nature of how we measure these kinds of things before we jump into the details of BRITE specifically. So when we talk about measuring team performance, we're talking about using a survey, the BRITE survey, to find indicators of psychological factors that are predictive of team effectiveness, which means we call this a psychometric measure. And what we're trying to do here is quantify parts of the mind that we're interested in. And importantly here, remember that we're measuring the mind, which means we're not providing a definitive measure, sort of like a brain scan or a medical scan, but rather a diagnostic outline of the relevant issues. The idea is that the results will help us identify strengths and areas for development for the team, and also give us a rich and broad vocabulary to orient us to a productive conversation. Importantly, measuring a team is about measuring the collective entity of the team as a whole. We aren't just measuring individuals and then adding up the parts, but rather we're trying to assess how this unique constellation of individual abilities and attitudes come together to manifest as this team. Because it is really in the way that individuals come together and interact and share with each other that produces the team, which is why we think measuring teams as a whole is so critical. Remember, if you can measure it, you can manage it.
Yes. So before we dive into the details about the assessment, I think it may be helpful to understand a little more about what we mean by teams. You'll note in our definition here that teams may exist within an organization, even if they're not formally identified as a team. Indeed, in a Mercer Global Trends study, they found that almost every company around the world has some form of teaming that's used to deliver products, solve problems, and generate creative solutions. The reason that the companies operate in teams is because they can be more effective than individuals. In fact, there's almost nothing a team cannot accomplish when they work together well. They can be more efficient than individuals, and they can actually produce more innovative solutions. When there's a dynamic synergism between team members, it elevates individual members' motivation and their cognitive energy to pursue challenging goals and to create something greater than the sum of its parts. In fact, you've probably all been on a team where everyone works well together. It's fun, it's exciting, and you actually look forward to doing the work because no one person has to be responsible for everything or generating all the solutions. When there's this shared responsibility, this kind of collective accountability, if you will, then productivity improves, the likelihood for successful task completion increases, and the decisions that are made are more effective, they're implemented better, and they're evaluated that helps lead to future success. However, in many teams, they don't really live up to their full potential. In fact, in one 2015 study that was reported in the Harvard Business Review, they found that over 75% of the teams they studied were dysfunctional. So rather than having this good flow of motivational and cognitive energy, team members are often at odds with one another. There's little cohesion or sharing of information, and team meetings then become contentious. They might be full of unmanaged conflict, or even if there's agreement, it's kind of at the surface level only. You've all probably also been on teams like this. They're draining to be a member of. Team members tune out more often than not, and they just go off and do their own thing. And what we end up doing is sometimes not getting the work done or forming smaller cliques where team members feel more accepted. We've developed Bright specifically to measure these types of factors that influence team effectiveness and to understand the underlying factors that either contribute to generating good team energy or create this dysfunctional team. To do this, we began with a 2-year study to determine what factors consistently predicted team effectiveness. This research included an extensive review of studies conducted with all types of teams from around the world. We also collected data from all the teams that Leadership Circle directly works with, and we included information that we gathered from coaches who work with those teams. The result of these efforts was the identification of 32 factors that directly influence team effectiveness through either generating team energy or disrupting team energy. These factors are not mutually exclusive, and they do interdependently react with each other. So they create a dynamic way of interacting among the teams that we categorize into 5 dynamic patterns, what we call 5 critical elements. We next developed the actual items and scales that would address those 5 critical elements, and then we conducted a series of psychometric tests. I did ask Crystal today if we could spend 3 hours talking about our psychometric analysis, and she said, oh, no, please limit that to 2 minutes. So let me just take a brief moment to talk to you about what we ran. First of all, we started with kind of a content analysis, making sure that our items actually performed and measured what we wanted them to do. So we looked at factors such as internal consistency of the items. We did content analysis, expert review, and with focus groups of those using the tool. Once we had a really good basic draft of the instrument, we went out and beta tested it with several teams, and we conducted a principal components analysis to see if the structure of our different scales, our different factors, actually held up. I won't bore you with all the psychometrics we ran on this, but I will tell you that every single time it met the standards for good reliability and validity. We then further conducted predictive validity tests by correlating Bright's outcomes with a measure of actual team effectiveness, and it correlated at 0.69. So those of you who've been through your LCP training will remember that's a high level of correlation and really suggests a strong indicator that Bright measures what it's intended to measure. As we gather more data on teams, we'll continue to work on the psychometrics and look to see that it's doing exactly what we think, including a full confirmatory factor analysis.
All right, let's dive into how the Bright model works for a little bit. So we selected a light bulb, this icon that you see on your screen, to represent the 5 critical elements of Bright because, like teams, a light bulb is also a dynamic energy system. The filament in the light bulb either produces good energy flow, leading to illumination, or if there is some kind of deficiency, energy is reduced and then dims the output. In the same way, the dynamic interaction of team members can either unleash creative energy, leading to bright and innovative ideas, or disrupt team functioning, resulting in diminished performance. Let's go through those 5 elements. So the first down here in the bottom left is mindsets, which is the underlying beliefs and value systems that each individual member holds concerning the team. These influence how team members think and feel and interact with each other and the rest of the organization. Next, structure is the way the team is organized, including who is on the team, the roles and responsibilities of its members, and where decision authority resides. Team structures can vary widely depending on the type of organization, the purpose of the team, and the role of the team leader. But there are core factors that must be present in all teams to allow the right dynamics to take place. Next is psychological safety and cohesion. This is one of the biggest influences on team dynamics and certainly one of the most well-researched areas of team effectiveness. And this concerns the environment in which the team functions. Is that environment safe? Do people feel like they can take personal risks? Are they confident that others will not embarrass or reject out of hand or punish someone for speaking up? And it's an environment where people can ideally trust each other's intentions. Psychological safety fosters an interconnectedness and a sense of we-ness, this attitude that signifies a strong bond among team members. Individuals then see themselves as part of a collective whole. Next, processes refers to the ways that the team operates and the quality of their interactions. This includes the level of communication and collaboration between team members and the usefulness of knowledge that emerges. It also encompasses the extent to which the team monitors and regulates its processes, and then also how it manages conflict. Finally, at the top, we see team performance skills, and these refer to cognitive skills and abilities that directly produce outcomes and achieve team goals. This is what most people think of and see when they're looking at a team. So these include things like problem solving, strategic planning, decision making, implementation, evaluation, and continuous improvement. This is a direct output of teamwork. You'll also notice in this model that we've got these interlocking puzzle pieces here. And this is to highlight the interdependence of all the elements on each other and how they contribute to the dynamics in each other. So like a light bulb, energy builds up from the base, in this case, mindsets and structure. It's challenging to produce a great team performance skills without the energy from the more foundational elements. For example, strategic decision-making is difficult without having shared goals that provide energy and direction for a decision. I'd like to highlight this a little bit more with some arrows that show how the energy flows up from the bottom and then around and through the light bulb here, like for instance, from mindsets to psychological safety and cohesion, from structure to processes, and then all throughout the light bulb. I want to drive home the idea here that this is a dynamic system, that all these pieces are present, but they're influencing each other in subtle and important ways all of the time and interacting with each other. The idea here is that if there's a lot of energy present, then the light bulb is going to shine really bright. But if there's anything disrupting this energy flow, if there's anything that's holding it back or preventing that energy from really being unleashed, then the light bulb will be dimmer and not as bright, won't produce as much light. So based on the responses of the team to each of the questions in the assessment, the BRITE will calculate a generative and disruptive energy within each element. Generative factors are those that produce or unleash the dynamic energy in the system, and disruptive factors drain the energy away from the system. And I've just highlighted that here. The generative factors on the left, that's that big yellow arrow that's pouring energy into the system, and disruptive factors are taking energy out of the system. Okay. Let's take a concrete look at one of the individual elements, mindsets, and here are all of the generative and disruptive factors that go along with that mindset. So on the left, you see generative factors here. There are 3 of them in this case. But for example, a team that really understands what they are all about and what they are pursuing is going to direct more energy towards the collective goals of the team. We call this and measure it as one team, one goal. Likewise, all the teams where all the members believe that the team can succeed will have more motivation to pursue team goals. And we call this belief in team efficacy. Also, teams where members understand that they are part of a larger whole focus more energy on goals that will be important to the organization, represented there as systemic view. And on the other side, on the right side there, you have disruptive factors. These are the ones that drain energy from the system. When members in a team are off pursuing their own individual agendas or operate, and then as a consequence, operate in silos, they have less energy to focus on collective goals, which are represented here as silo mentality. When some team members have a negative attitude, they tend to depress the overall energy present in the system and kind of bring the overall ability for energy to flow down as a whole, represented here as negative attitude. And then just like in the LCP, where blaming is a reactive tendency, when a team focuses on problems and placing blame, it detracts from energy needed to grow and improve. And we call that blaming culture. So this is an example of the generative and disruptive factors present in mindsets, just to give you an idea here. And to help us understand how much energy is present, we give a score based on a 100-point scale. Ideally, you want the scores on the generative factors to be high, above 80, and the scores on the disruptive factors to be low or below 40. We refer to this rule of thumb as the 80-40 rule. So in our example, for instance, you can tell that this team has not unleashed as much energy as they could. All the scores are below 80 on the generative factors. And this team has some strong disruptive factors at play, all scoring above 40, which is probably why they have not unleashed more generative energy. Then, to measure the energy level of each element, we aggregate the scores across the generative and disruptive factors. So to represent this, we provide shading for each element. A bright white shading indicates a full flow of energy produced by generative factors scoring over 80 and relatively few disruptors not scoring very high on those. If the puzzle piece, if the actual element present has a gray shading, then that indicates partial energy flow. And this is caused by less generative factors playing a role and maybe an increased presence of disruptors. And finally, the dark shading, the black, indicates the insufficient level of energy is present. This is going to indicate some pretty strong issues with team performance and how the team is functioning. And is always paired with a strong presence of disruptors. Okay. So going back to our example with mindsets, just to provide a concrete example of this, remembering that the team that we had really low scores on the generative factors, represented here by this really small kind of weak yellow arrow here, it would produce an element here with dark shading because the disruptive energy that's flowing out is also really big. So the disruptive energy present in the system is really draining and there's not much coming into the system. Thus, we get this black representation of insufficient energy. Okay. However, if the team had instead really high scores on the generative factors, indicated here by this really big bright yellow, and really low scores on the disruptive factors, indicated by this little small black level, then the score on the element would be represented by white, meaning that full energy was present here. Okay. And then just to round that out, if the overall generative factors and disruptive factors were fairly balanced, the energy was about the same between them, that would result in a partial energy represented here as gray. To put that all together, what you'll see in the report that Brett generates is for each element, there's a page with the generative and disruptive factors, as well as a page, which I have displayed right here, with the energy score for that element, along with a brief description of the element. So we take all of the energy scores from each element and then aggregate them together into an overall team effectiveness score. And so here you see that represented here. There's the puzzle piece. There's a representation of how the team is doing in each of the individual mindsets, and then an overall collective team effectiveness score. You can see each element's shading, and I have an overall indication of what that team effectiveness score is right on the report. So based on our experience and our research, we've identified the criteria for 5 levels of team effectiveness. I'm just going to go through those real quick for you. An exceptional team, in other words, a team scoring between 88 and 100, this would be a world-class team, and they represent less than 7% of all the teams. So not that many teams should be at a world-class level or are going to be at that. In this team, in an exceptional team, there's an abundance of energy, great flow throughout the team with very few disruptors. Next is a high-performing team. This would be scoring between 70 and 87. They are effective, but not yet a world-class team. And this would be about 15% of teams will fall into this category. There's good energy here in most areas of team functioning, but there are also some gaps that may be reducing the overall capability of the team to achieve all of their goals in an efficient manner. Next is the moderately effective team. About 45% of teams fall into this category, which is about the bulk of teams. So they're neither highly effective nor ineffective. They have strengths, but also one or two key areas that are holding them back. They're likely experiencing some successes, but also some setbacks. Then the low performing team, the score between 33 and 50. This is representing about 25% of teams. They generally lack energy, making teamwork tedious and exhausting. It's possible that one or two team members may be largely disruptive, draining energy from the group as a whole. And finally is the ineffective team, scoring below a 30. And just like the exceptional team, there are relatively few of these, around 8%. But when you get a team at scoring this level, they're in serious trouble. There is little, if any, positive energy or capitalization on the collective skills of everyone. Consequently, usually team members give up on pursuing team goals and instead work only on their own agendas.
Okay, let's make this a little more real. I'd like for us to break up into groups. We'll take smaller groups of about 10 each. And within each group, I'd like for you to discuss the biggest challenge that you've experienced in working with or participating on a team. We'll give you 5 minutes to hold this discussion and then come back prepared to rejoin the entire group with a list of your 3 biggest challenges. And we'll try to get to as many of those as we can, and then talk about where you would find that in the BRITE model. Crystal, will you put everybody in teams for us?
You got it. Okay, here we go.
Welcome back. So let's take a few examples. And if your team wants to share a challenge that came up during your discussion, please just raise your hand and then we'll call on them as we see them and answer as many of those we can in the next couple of minutes. Great. Cynthia, yours was the first one I saw. What did your team discuss?
Okay, the great team 16, the 3 we came up with: alignment, kind of specifically in the goals, roles, and responsibility arena, accountability, and psychological safety. And we thought it fit the BRITE model in terms of mindset and psychological safety.
Absolutely. I think you're right on. Alignment is a terrific piece that often gets overlooked in mindsets. So one of the things BRITE does is to measure not just the perception of alignment, because often if you've ever been with teams and worked with them, they go, oh yeah, we're all aligned. We agree on it. But then when you actually get down to having them discuss what are the strategic priorities, what are you working on, you find out, oh, you're not as aligned as you think. And so BRITE tries to take both that perceptive view, but also concrete examples so that you begin to see how aligned are you really? And then you're right with the psychological safety too. Terrific. Next one up on my screen is Ron. You want to tell us what your group discussed?
Yep, a couple things. Thank you. Lack of trust in each other, lack of trust in the leader, and then ego. And then the way we defined ego was people dominating at meetings, wanting to get it right, withholding information, doing that. Everybody has an opinion, but nobody listens. And then other things, including like not being able to have those difficult conversations.
Oh, absolutely perfect. And in fact, that's almost verbatim. You know, I'll see if Joseph shakes his head and tells me yes. But what we're measuring in that psychological safety element is really a lot about not just the trust, but the participation structures, the ability to want to garner diverse opinions, and also within processes. You'll remember that Joseph talked about that as monitoring, how regulating, how well we're giving time and airtime to others. What we see as a disruptor there are those dominators of conversation. And then BRITE helps explain why. So there's also reasons, not just coming from a reactive standpoint in the way we think about it in LCP, but also the dynamics that lead to domination. So many times it's just not creating the environment that welcomes all of those opinions, and that really learning how to process together, how to do constructive controversy, and how to really engage in a way that's really useful to the team. Joseph, I'll let you take one. Why don't you see someone out there that you can call on?
All right, I see Jane. Can you share with us what you guys talked about?
Yeah. In addition to the competing priorities you mentioned, Petra and Gaiska also mentioned the meetings people weren't listening or participating. So meeting inefficiency, one, as when a team comes together, not listening because they were overloaded, and no structure for problem solving, for adding value to each participant. It was info push, not a structured way to brainstorm together safely.
That's an excellent example. Thanks, Jane. Yeah, that's the issues with how meetings are run comes up pretty frequently. We've got several items in the Bright that directly measure not only people's experiences with meetings, but sort of how they're planned, how they're run. You'll find a lot of ways in which we measure that, so we can get a better idea of how the team as a whole is approaching meetings, for instance. And that goes back to what Lonnie had mentioned and what we mentioned before about team alignment. It can be that some people on the team feel that meetings are working great, but then other people in the team aren't as perceiving of that as everyone else is. And so it can be really interesting from the Bright when you get your scores back to see how everyone aligns on a certain perception, such as how the team meetings are going and how everyone is able to participate or not participate in a discussion. Great. Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, excellent. Just by show, wave your hands and we can look around. How many have ever been in a meeting we went, this was a fully waste of my time? And what we want to know is why. I don't think there's any of us that haven't experienced that, right? But, two things. One is because we don't really stick to what the key objectives are. We haven't even outlined what they are. We haven't thought about what it is we're trying to accomplish in the meeting. We don't do any kind of come back to that. And so really all of Bright is leading to a so what? So what would be the next steps? How do I help change that, right? How do I alter a meeting so that it is much more effective? How do I create the environment so that it's much more engaging? And that really takes us to our next slide, is we've developed not only the assessment tool itself, but we've developed an actual strategic facilitation guide. So if we go to that next slide there for a moment, Joseph, you'll see here just some key captures. We aren't going to go into this today, but this is really kind of a self-certification guide. So once you've gone through this, you're going to be an expert at how to take those Bright results and apply them in your team to be able to help them make progress. So it includes examples of what do the most effective and the least effective teams look like in each of these areas of Bright. When you get these results, what are the patterns? What do we see coming out of it? We've also created 38 distinctive strategies that correspond to each of those patterns that really start the conversation with the team about how to improve their effectiveness and how to increase the energy flow among team members. The guide concludes with a section that references the relationship between individual and team development. And as you might imagine, there is a complex interplay between individual and team strengths. While a team's competence can surpass the collective ability of the individual members, it's still the performance of individual members that are contributing to team effectiveness. And they play a pivotal role then in the potential a team has. For instance, if you've got team members with really good interpersonal intelligence, measured like on an LCP, what you'll find is they have more cognitive and emotional intelligence when it comes to the team. They'll be able to understand more about where the team is at and how to react when they see certain patterns within the team. So I think we're getting a little feedback. So if you haven't muted, if you'll go ahead and also mute your mic at this moment, that'd be great. So to maximize the impact, what we really want to focus on is both developing a team, but also developing individual members of the team. And that provides kind of a multiplier effect, if you will. So we've used here a little bit of a model to take our universal model from the LCP and say which aspects are really important, do we know directly impact the ability to play out in each of these 5 critical areas of our teaming. And as you can imagine, when you've got high creativity, those aspects that are in our second column here, what you have is individuals who are more adaptable, they're more innovative, they're more forward thinking, and that brings that generative energy into the team. When you have individuals that are more reactive, especially those characteristics that you see in the last column there, what they're often bringing in is a lot of control focus, a lot of fearfulness to change, a defensiveness, rigidity, and they're more likely to blame others for what's going on with very low resilience. So what they do is actually bring draining or disruptive energy with the team. And that can actually, if it gets to the extreme, become dysfunctional team members, tears the team apart. The interplay between the individual characteristics and the team dynamics can exacerbate an already challenging situation. So, for instance, when a team member lacks the necessary information to feel like an integral part of the team, or hasn't been encouraged to contribute their unique strengths in a more inclusive manner, it can amplify their insecurities. That increases that increased sense of insecurity, then increases their chance of leaning into a reactive orientation. And that depletes even further the team's energy. So you can see it becomes a negative feedback loop. So given the interplay between the individual dynamics and the team dynamics, you might ask, when should we use BRITE versus when should we use some of the other leadership circle assessments? And I think part of that depends on what you need to know about the development work that you're going to engage in. Won't go through this whole table here, but you can see that there's a lot of differences in the different assessments and what they're looking at. The first thing you'll notice, and let's just go through the acronyms really quickly, because you know at Leadership Circle, we love our acronyms. We're talking LCP, which is that Leadership Circle profile, right? And for the CLA, we're talking about the Collective Leadership Assessment. So that is the one that's measured on an entire group of leaders, could be a team of leaders. The GEA stands for the Group Effectiveness Assessment, and that's that secondary look at LCPs that garners what the patterns are across several individual members. And then the TPS stands for Team Performance Synergy Assessment, and that's also using the Leadership Circle profile to measure potential for team energy or team synergy. You'll notice in this table that if you're focused on individual development, then your best tools would be the LCP and the GEA, and to some extent the TPS. But neither BRITE nor the CLA really provide information on individual skills. All assessments, however, do provide some measure of collective leadership competency. So if you're looking at a team or a group, they're all going to give you some information, including the LCP, as long as you run an LCP group report. However, this is only lightly touched in that LCP and in BRITE. The CLA and the TPS have some measures of team synergy based on individual leadership characteristics, providing one aspect of team effectiveness, that is having an effective leadership skill, which is an important aspect to be sure, but is only one aspect. To assess the other inter-team dynamic levels, the formation of the team, the unity of the team, the emergent states that evolve as team members interact with one another are not covered in those assessments. And they're only covered in BRITE, which then gives you a broader coverage of what really it is to be team and to be an effective team. So if you're really focused on team development, BRITE is going to give you more information, a broader based information. Further, BRITE was designed to be used with any type of team. Leadership teams, service teams, production teams, project teams, etc. Whereas because of the other measures focus on leadership skills, they really are only ideally suited to use with leadership teams. Note that the measures can be used in conjunction with each other. In fact, some of what we've seen really effectively work with teams is to use both BRITE and like an LCP. It gives you both sides of the coin, the individual level of development and the team development. And in fact, many times organizations will open up more to doing individual development work and LCPs if they've actually had BRITE. And so, Joseph, you could key up a video. We have one that Betsy Leatherman shared with us. She just did a bunch of work with Microsoft Teams and some areas, and she actually went in and used BRITE first as a way of selling LCPs. And so she describes this briefly.
Hi, I'm Betsy Leatherman, President of Leadership Circle Consulting Services and a principal here at the Leadership Circle. So most of you probably know that part of our role is to go out and try new things with our clients, hear new positioning, see how that's resonating with everyone. And the BRITE team asked me to share a little bit about what I've been using as it relates to BRITE with customers. So here it goes. So I want you to think of kind of two scenarios. Scenario number one is a customer that we've never worked with before. When they come in and we begin talking, what I would kind of encourage in terms of the question is to ask, as you come to us with this inquiry, are you thinking more about the individuals, the team, or the whole system? And then if they started with team, I would absolutely go into questions that led me to understand a little bit about how they were in terms of mindset as a team, what the structure looks like, how is their psychological safety and cohesion, what are their processes, and then their performance skills. I would ask questions around those things to basically hear a little bit from the customer about how the team is doing in those areas, and then talk about assessing them in that regard, and then creating a team developmental process that would address all of those issues. So to me, that just kind of is a great opportunity to bring Bright in from the beginning. Now, if it's a customer that's done LCP work with us or CLA work, and they know the model, they're familiar with the universal model, they might even feel like that's their model. And I do that conversation a little bit differently. So for me, and this is not from a psychometric perspective, but more from like a how it all just lines up in my own head perspective. When I think about the universal model, the LCP model that you all are familiar with, I think about the area of teamwork and collaboration. And I like to believe that Bright kind of lives underneath there. So if we've done LCPs, and if we know that both teamwork and collaboration are areas that we as either individuals or because of our group report need to focus on, to do that, I would then go right to the Bright model for a couple of different reasons. One, it's a developmental model. So at its core DNA, it is about developing that team. It's an effectiveness model. So also at its core DNA, it's about making that team more effective. And in linking those two together, for me, it kind of holds together of why I might be starting to talk about these 5 elements versus the 18 core competencies. So I would go into that around, what is the kind of team and collaboration elements? What does it look like? What do we know so far about this team? And then I'd go right to the questions. In this case, if they've already been doing
Joseph, let's go ahead and stop here.
the mindsets of the team.
I
Yep.
love that, and she'll go on forever. We're going to include that video when we send out transcripts so you can see the whole thing, but you get the idea. There's lots of entry points to come in to an organization. And one of the things that we found is sometimes an organization may be a little leery about the cost. And Bright's a great way to say, here's an introduction that's not going to be as expensive. And then once they gravitate, they see, ooh, what do we do? How do we make this better? It also launches that ability then to say, hey, we've also got other tools that come in and work individually with each of your team members. Joseph.
All right. So how does Bright compare to the other teaming products and assessments out there? I'm sure some of you are familiar with some of them. We do have a comprehensive comparison chart available on the Bright webpage. I just want to kind of walk you through some of the findings of that real quick. So out of all the assessments, and we looked at about 30 or so of the most frequently used team assessments, commercially available team assessments, we found that only 40% or roughly 40% don't even focus on the team as a whole. They just look at individuals and not that collective emergent property of the team as a whole. Also, many of these assessments have a narrow or limited focus, including only some factors of team effectiveness. Usually, in this case, it'd be something like just the personalities of the team members or individual strengths. The vast majority do not cover both skills and dysfunctions, but the Bright does this. And then 2/3 don't collect data from all team members. They just collect data from the team leader and just get that one perspective on how a team is doing, which is really not quite as insightful as everyone's view of the team. Also, relatively few are based on a well-researched model or have strong psychometric properties. And very few provide feedback for different types of teams, like leadership and all the other different types of teams that we've talked about. Like, not just Bright focuses on all the types of teams, not just leadership. Okay. So we found that Bright not only covers all of these aspects, it measures each of these aspects and addresses each of these. But we also found that it's cheaper than it's less expensive than all the other teaming assessments out there. So most assessments charge on a per person basis. So in that case, an average cost for a team of 10 would be about $4,500. Whereas Bright does not charge per person. It just has one flat rate of $1,500 for the team. Or if you're a practitioner, member of our community, it is $1,140. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the practical side of this, how you would go about ordering it and what that experience is like for the team members. So we launched this through an online order form in Shopify, which is also how you pay for the Bright. And the link to this order form is on the Bright website. The order form will ask for your contact information as well as specific questions about the team. And so I've kind of summarized that information here. This is what you want to collect before you make the order, right? So all of the good stuff like name of team, and then some individual explanations about some of those things, like for example, when the assessment is to launch, the date. This can't be the day that you order it. We need to have at least 1 day to set up the process and program everything in and get it ready to go through its automatic process. But it can be as far in advance as you want. So if you have a team that you know is going to take the Bright, let's say in a month from now, you can go ahead and order it and put in, give us all the information that we need, and we can launch it exactly when you tell us to, when you specify there as well. And then also for the target date, we recommend leaving the assessment open for about 2 weeks. This is what we've found ensures the most complete, highest response rate. But if you have some individual needs there with some specific circumstances with the team, we can either leave it open longer or shorter depending on your specific need. But it is important, really important, to leave at least 2 days before you're scheduled to meet with your team and discuss the results, and give us at least 2 days to produce those results. So after the survey finishes, when it closes, to when you will present it or share with the team, at least 2 days there. Okay. And then it's also important to tell us where you want the report sent. Some people want the report sent to them specifically, so then they can take that report and share it with their team. And some people would prefer that the report just go directly to the team leader, who can start processing that information. We'll send it wherever you tell us to put it there. All right, so yeah, provided that this information has been collected ahead of time, it takes about 5 minutes to fill out that form. Once the form is submitted, the remainder of the process is automatic, and it runs on a professional SurveyMonkey platform. Eventually, the whole assessment will be embedded into Project Center. So the system sends out invites with links to the assessment, and that goes to the team leader and each individual team member. They all each get their own email with a survey link. Okay. And then you will be alerted via email on the completion rates as the target date for closing the assessment approaches, so you can make any decisions about whether you want to extend the data collection window, or if you've got everyone's responses that you need right there. And then once the survey closes, we would generate the report and deliver that within 2 business days. Okay, so how does this feel like from the team that's actually taking the Bright? So from their perspective, Bright is fully automated. They're going to receive that personalized email. Remember, each of them are completing this assessment separately. They're going to get an email from our email at research@leadership.com. It's going to have a unique link to the Bright assessment, and that email also has a nice description of the purpose of the assessment, how long they have to complete it, things like that. The system then monitors completion rates, and we send reminders to people that haven't responded yet. Usually the first reminder goes out about a week after the release date, and then another reminder goes out before the close date to try to catch anybody who hasn't responded yet. As far as how long it takes them about 20 minutes or so to complete the survey. And another important part of this one that's unique to this assessment, that does not take place on some of the other assessments that we offer, is that respondents have the ability to complete the survey over time. That is, they can literally leave the survey. Let's say if they get busy with something else, don't have time to finish it right then, they can come back in and finish taking the survey at a later date. So the way we have it set up is that they can stop and then restart that survey as many times as they need to in order to complete the survey.
Great. So we've been talking for quite a while. I do want to open up for the last 10 minutes for questions that you might have, and we'll try to get to as many of these as we can today. So again, if you'll raise your hand, that way we can just call on you. And I know, Drew, you've had your hand up for a long time, so let me go to you first and see if you have a question that you want to give us. I think it's Drew Daughtry.
Yeah, you're on mute, Drew.
Yeah, unmute. So is there an option for, does it work well with interviews of team members? in addition?
You can supplement it. The nice thing with interviews is, when you work with teams, you already have a feeling for where they're at. What this provides you is an objective data that's coming back from all team members to supplement what you're seeing, and what gives you the interview gives you kind of the richness to talk through it, but you have the evidence and the data stretch that you can actually lean into. So that's a great idea. All right, next one is Gigi's.
Yeah, my question was around, is there also, do you also have some like examples of what follow-up processes or how a process flow would look like? Start initiating the Bright, then doing the debriefs, and then what comes next in your experience?
Yes, we're working on developing some additional, what we call team accelerator programs. So Mark Burrell, who many of you are familiar with, is going to be working on additional work that you could do with teams. Bright takes you through the front end. It's a diagnostic tool. It gives you kind of the starting point. The strategic guide gives you the next strategies, and then we'll be developing further out. I will mention also that we will be having a training that goes much more in depth and gives you a chance to interact and work with Bright and to learn a little bit more about it. That'll be coming up in the first quarter of next year. So there's an opportunity to dig a little deeper on what it means to actually do team development work as opposed to just individual development work. But right now, it's just the diagnostic tool that's available, although it has a lot of information strategies there that you can take to the next step.
Can I have one short follow-up question?
Sure.
So the follow-up question would be, when obviously there will be multiple areas of development coming out of this assessment, and then would these would you guys design a process specifically for those areas of development, or would you write an integral approach that is, because it's obviously systemic because they're interlinked?
Right. They are interlinked, but we do give priorities. So one of the things you'll find in the strategic guide is how to design the priorities of what you want to develop first based on the findings that are within Bright. So one of the things we know, for instance, is foundationally, if you don't have mindsets aligned and in common, all the rest of that doesn't unleash the energy. Remember that Joseph talked about this energy building upon itself. So that's always a great place to start, especially if you don't see that as maximized. And so there is some order and fluidity to this, and that's in the strategic guide. Marco.
Thank you.
I think you're on mute as well.
Sorry about that. Thank you. You might have mentioned that, but where can we find an example of report that each team member would receive?
So there is an example on the Bright web link. If you go into the web page inside the LCP site, and we'll make sure we send out a link to that website when it comes out with the transcript, but there is an actual copy of the report that you can download from there. And soon we'll have that strategic guide up there too, so you can have both and you can access it from the website.
Great, thanks.
I just added a link to the sample report in the chat, so if you want to take a look.
Oh, Kristen,
Thanks, Crystal.
on top of it. She's faster than I can even be. Great, fantastic. Jill.
Hey, thank you. I'm about to run this with a team of senior leaders that have all been with the company for 5 to 25 years. I'm curious, would you run the LCP, then the team, then Bright, or would you run Bright, then LCP?
I think you could do it either way. One of the questions I would have is, do you see any reticence to change? If there's any kind of resistance or belief that we got it together, Bright's a great entree one to show up where they might not be as in alignment as they think they are. And then that opens the opportunity for individual development. But if you already have people who are saying, I'm committed to improving myself, you could go the other way as well. Bright just sets a kind of context where we're all in it together. And then you can use some of that peer coaching to help influence what comes out from an LCP, for instance.
Yeah, I was actually more concerned the LCP tends to take 3 to 4 weeks to get all the results in, whereas this one being just 2 seems like a nice little starter tidbit.
And that too. Excellent, excellent point. Great. Yep. Joseph, do you want to tell me who you see next?
Let's see. Part of my
Emma,
there we go.
I
was trying to get your first name. Part of my screen. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you very much for this session. And I'm sorry if I've missed the detail of it, but just could you summarize for me again the distinction between this profile and the CLA? I haven't quite got that.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
really, they're probably the closest, and they're also the most complementary in many respects. The CLA really measures collective leadership effectiveness. So it's saying, how well is this group of leaders leading, right? And so it's individual skills that are about leading outward. BRITE is not only, it has a portion that is also leadership skills, but it's more, how does the team work together? What are the dynamic interactions? What's it composed of? Do you have the right people on the team? What are they generating together that emerges, that occurs only because you're working across each other? So if you want to think about it, CLA does a deep dive in one area. Fantastic if that's the area you're worrying about or wanting to work on. But the BRITE does a broad-based dive across all areas. So it's going to show up in other things other than just leadership problems. I had a great example. I was talking with a coach the other day ago, said, it's kind of like the US's basketball team in the Olympics. If you've ever watched them, half the time they don't do really well, even though they're all stars. They're all individually great in their own right, but they don't always come together as a team. And so what may happen is the CLA might pick up that they're all individually bright. They've got great skills. It might not pick up that they aren't working together well as a team.
That's
Great.
great.
Time for one more. So Joseph, who else do you see there?
Tim, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that if we are currently certified with the LCP, we are able to access this today. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, because I know I saw some questions about, do we need to be certified to use this, that type of thing. So thank you.
Yeah, no, actually the strategic guide gives you everything you'll need to debrief this and work through it. So it is a kind of a self-certified, and because you've already had experience working with individual, it's just a matter of taking that same experience to the team.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to end it here for us today, but I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. We will be getting out to you a transcript. We will go out. I know we didn't get to everybody's questions today. We will go through that thoroughly and make sure that we provide an FAQ that also answers every one of those, and we'll attach it with the transcript. We're also going to attach, I think, 2 videos with Betsy. There's the one that we started today. It's a little bit longer. We'll put that in. And there's a short one that I also want you to hear. So we'll add everything that we think would be useful to you. And then we really look forward to you using BRITE.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you.